In every room, there's a presence that commands attention, before a single word is spoken. That's not coincidence. That's power cultivated. Because true command doesn't start with speech, it starts with energy. It's not the loudest voice that dominates the room. It's the most grounded one. The most still one. The one whose silence draws attention, not repels it. The modern world is obsessed with speaking, asserting, branding. But the greatest leaders throughout history, those who didn't just gain power but retained it, understood something deeper. Respect doesn't come from demand. It comes from design. It's not requested. It's structured into how you carry yourself. Start with posture. With gaze. With stillness. A person who constantly shifts, reacts, fills every silence with noise, they're communicating insecurity. But the one who's unhurried, whose movements are deliberate, who listens without rushing to respond, that person bends the room. They create emotional gravity. And here's why: people associate control with safety. The one who's calm in chaos, who isn't thrown by pressure, becomes the one others look to. Not because they said they're the leader, but because their presence makes others feel led. Confidence, when it's real, doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to prove. It just is. This is where the philosophy of respect begins, not with confrontation, but with cultivation. You build the aura of command long before you're ever challenged. And when the challenge does arrive, your foundation holds. Because respect gained through image fades. But respect earned through consistency, that lasts. Now here's the connecting truth: once your presence begins commanding attention, the next phase emerges, not just holding space, but influencing behavior without force. In part 2, we'll step deeper into how respect is reinforced through boundaries, and how those boundaries quietly teach others how to treat you. You don't need to chase validation. You just need to master stillness. Let's move forward, into the architecture of boundary-led authority. Part 2, boundaries define you, and teach the world how to treat you. Presence pulls attention, but boundaries hold it. Without clear lines, even the most magnetic figure dissolves into chaos. Because people don't respect what's available at all times, to all people, for any reason. Respect is born where access is limited. Where the perimeter is visible, even if not loudly announced. Boundaries aren't walls. They're definitions. They tell others what's permitted, what's earned, what's unacceptable. And the strongest boundaries don't need to be screamed, they're enforced through consistency. You don't warn people not to disrespect you. You make it clear through action: what you tolerate, you teach. Now here's the trap: most people believe boundaries are about saying no loudly. But in command philosophy, boundaries are about where you invest your energy silently. Who gets your time? Who gets your insight? Who gets proximity to your calm? When you become selective, your value rises, not because you're withholding out of pride, but because you know that overexposure dilutes impact. In every powerful figure's story, you'll find this common thread: at some point, they stopped explaining themselves. They stopped over-defending their decisions. They stopped chasing understanding. That's when the shift occurred. They stopped operating for consensus, and started operating from conviction. This shift confuses people, because they're used to testing limits and getting reactions. But when you enforce a boundary without emotional charge, it forces a recalibration. They begin to approach you differently. Not because you threaten them, but because you train them. A calm no speaks louder than an angry justification. Silence after disrespect is more powerful than retaliation. Absence, when a boundary is crossed, rewires behavior far more than a speech ever could. And this is why boundary-led command is so powerful. It turns you from someone who manages people into someone who shapes environments. And here's the natural evolution of this thought: once your boundaries are intact, you begin influencing without speaking. You no longer chase correction, you model behavior. In Part 3, we'll explore the third pillar of command, leading without control, and how respect deepens when your actions shape others, not your authority. It's no longer about holding the line. It's about becoming the standard. Let's go deeper. Part 3, Influence without force, becoming the standard others imitate. Once your boundaries are firm and your presence is felt, a shift begins to unfold. You no longer have to ask for respect, it starts arriving unannounced. But here's the deeper shift: command isn't about control. It's about influence. The kind of influence that doesn't demand, doesn't coerce, it models. And in doing so, it rewires the environment around you. You've likely seen this before. One person walks into a room and changes the energy without speaking. People lower their voices. Conversations shift tone. Behavior adjusts. That's not charisma, it's command. And it stems not from dominance, but from integrity. When your standards are so deeply lived that others feel them just by watching you, you've moved beyond authority, you've become the reference point. This is the foundation of real respect. People begin to mirror you, not because you told them to, but because you showed them who not to be. You don't argue with fools. You don't overreact to noise. You don't lower your standards to fit into temporary spaces. And by holding your line with calm discipline, you set a bar that forces others to rise or step back. And when they do rise, they never forget who calibrated them. The truth is, most people live in emotional reaction. They follow trends, chase validation, collapse under pressure. But when they encounter someone who's rooted, unaffected, precise, they become uncomfortable, and then inspired. You didn't tell them what to fix. You showed them what stability looks like. That's the secret: the leader is rarely the loudest. The leader is the one whose conduct demands internal reflection from others. When people watch you and quietly adjust themselves, without you lifting a finger, you're no longer influencing behavior. You're shaping identity. Now here's the next layer. Influence is powerful, but it must be backed by something deeper, something invisible yet foundational. In Part 4, we'll examine what truly holds your command in place: self-respect. Because if others are mirroring you, what are they really looking at? We've moved from presence, to boundaries, to behavior. Now we go to the source that fuels it all. Let's keep building. Part 4, Self-respect is the root, the command that no one sees. Command begins with presence. It's held by boundaries. It radiates through influence. But its core, the root of it all, is self-respect. Because if you don't respect yourself, nothing you build will last. Not your boundaries. Not your influence. Not even your silence. You can't fake self-respect. It reveals itself in the smallest decisions. The texts you answer. The way you allow yourself to be spoken to. The company you keep. The goals you pursue when no one's watching. Respect isn't something you demand from the world, it's something you train the world to mirror, based on how you treat yourself. Here's the harsh truth: most people want respect from others without having earned it from themselves. They say the right things, but tolerate disrespect behind closed doors. They talk about standards, but break them for comfort. They want authority, but live in contradiction. And the people around them? They can feel it. Always. You set the tone for your world by how you treat yourself when it would be easiest not to. The discipline to say no to quick comfort. The integrity to walk away when your values are disrespected. The focus to pursue excellence not for applause, but because you refuse to settle for average. That's self-respect. And it radiates. People trust those who trust themselves. People follow those who are centered, not performative. And the more you operate from that inner clarity, the less you need to explain yourself. Your energy speaks. Your decisions speak. Your restraint speaks. And what they say is simple: this person knows exactly who they are. And that's what makes your presence so commanding, not the posture, not the image, but the alignment. When your actions, values, and decisions are synchronized, you stop needing validation. You move with quiet certainty. And certainty is what the world respects the most. Now, let's bridge to the next level. If self-respect is the root, then what does it grow into? How does it evolve from internal alignment to external leadership? In Part 5, we'll break open the dynamic of leading without asking, how respect turns into voluntary loyalty, without ever needing a title or a microphone. You've become grounded. Now it's time to rise. Part 5, Leadership without titles, loyalty that follows you silently. Once self-respect is fully rooted in your identity, something powerful begins to unfold. People start following you without being asked. Not because of your title. Not because of authority assigned. But because of energy earned. This is the rarest form of command, the kind that moves people without ever telling them what to do. In traditional models, leadership is imposed. There's hierarchy. Rules. Orders. But in this deeper philosophy, leadership is magnetic. People feel it, not because you chase attention, but because your presence suggests stability. And in an unstable world, that becomes rare and invaluable. This is where real loyalty begins. It's not bought. It's not enforced. It's quietly chosen. People start aligning their behavior around yours. They anticipate your standards. They check themselves before disappointing you, not out of fear, but out of earned respect. You've become the silent compass. But this loyalty is fragile. It doesn't survive ego. It doesn't survive inconsistency. The moment you start demanding respect, or exploiting influence, or chasing followers, you lose the very thing that made people trust you. Because quiet leadership only survives in quiet discipline. When you remain rooted, the loyalty deepens. You'll notice it not in grand gestures, but in subtle cues. Someone who adjusts their language around you. Someone who defends your absence when you're not in the room. Someone who mimics your patience under pressure. These are the invisible ripples of influence. No command was given, yet the structure of behavior changed. And here's the most profound part: when you lead this way, you don't need to convince people to support you. They feel your intent. They respect your stillness. They protect your absence. Because you've become a symbol, not just of power, but of principle. They don't just follow your actions, they follow what you represent. So now the question becomes this: if your leadership can move people silently, how do you protect it? In Part 6, we'll enter the final phase, protecting command without becoming rigid, and how to evolve your influence without ever chasing power. Because the ultimate level of respect is not being followed. It's being remembered, even when you're no longer there. Part 6, Protecting Power, How to Stay Respected Without Seeking Control. You've built presence. You've drawn boundaries. You've influenced behavior, modeled self-respect, and earned silent loyalty. But here's where most lose it: they get comfortable. They mistake loyalty for permanence. They begin to control rather than lead. And in trying to hold on to power, they strangle the very respect that gave it to them. Command must be protected, not by force, but by evolution. The moment you start expecting loyalty, it disappears. The second you start repeating your old methods without adaptation, your relevance fades. And the instant you stop holding yourself to the standard you once set for others, people stop seeing you as the standard at all. Respect doesn't live in the past. It's a living thing. It breathes. It watches. It adjusts. You protect your authority not by locking it in place, but by growing beyond it. Those who remain quietly powerful over decades have one thing in common: they never chase the spotlight, but they never stand still either. They evolve with intention. They sharpen their thinking. They refine their circle. They speak less but mean more. Their standards rise with them. And because of that, their silence continues to weigh more than most people's noise. But here's the hidden danger: as your influence expands, so will the attempts to humanize you, to pull you closer, to decode you, to make you more accessible. You'll be tempted to explain, to soften, to open doors too wide. And when you do, you lose the aura. Not your power, but the mystery that sustains it. That's why the final layer of command is controlled availability. You protect your presence by limiting your exposure. You protect your influence by avoiding emotional entanglement. And you protect your legacy by letting others admire your distance, not because you're cold, but because you've learned that what's rare is respected, and what's common is consumed. The goal was never to dominate every room. It was to build a gravity so strong, people adjust themselves in your orbit, even in your absence. So as we bring this full circle, remember. You don't have to raise your voice to lead. You don't have to demand respect to receive it. You don't need control to command. What you need is alignment. Presence backed by principle. Boundaries guided by discipline. Silence shaped by wisdom. And a rhythm no one can predict, but everyone feels. That's how respect is built. That's how command is earned. And that's how power, once quiet, becomes permanent.